Thank you very much. Thanks, Leandro, for all the organization, and thank you also for giving me the opportunity to be here. I would like to present this maybe initial thoughts of challenges of housing policy in Chile. I try to take this out. I will divide very briefly the presentation in 4 sections. General background of Chilean housing policy, some general characteristic of housing programs, mainly showing that what the housing policy has been these 30 years, mainly considering housing as a product or as an object more than a process. That's one of the things we hope that it will change. And then the urban development policy is a policy that was just launched and approved this year, and that we hope that give the context of the new housing policy and some briefly conclusions. We could say that the housing policy in Chile has been, since it was implemented in mid-80s, as a policy oriented to subsidizing demand. The structure of the financial support is mainly based, it has always been, in 3 components. The beneficiary saving, the government subsidy, and credits. The credits at the beginning for the first 15 years or 10 years were just given by the government, the regional government, and then because there was a change of the policy in year 2000, that role was transferred to the private sector. The proportion of the 3 components varies according to the cost of the house and to each housing program. We have had several housing programs, but more or less in the same principle. The lower the price of the house, the higher the proportion provided by the subsidy. Although the average, the amount of the subsidy is more or less the same for all. So it's dependent. In one case, it could be like 90% of the cost of the house, and in another one, it could be like 20%. We can see here, just on the right, these different housing programs we have had over these 30 years. These are more or less the one that we have today. And basically, these housing programs have been oriented to urban low income and middle income families, to poor rural areas, and since very recently, in year 2006, implemented this program that is what we call an improvement program to the existing stock of housing that has been providing in the last years. And just last year, for the first time, it was created this renting program. We never have from the social sector or from the government support for the people for renting their houses. There was only, all the policy was oriented to help people to become home ownership. But, the government last year said that because we are a country that integrated the OXI, we should have like a policy on that. But there is still a discussion on if it would be needed or if it should be part of another system, or how it should be really developed. I will explain very briefly later how does it work. One of the most important aspect that has always been considered in housing, in Chilean housing policy, is its continuity. Since mid-80s, that when the first time this system started until today, it has always been an important amount of resources, financial resources given by the government to provide this, to implement this program. We can see here, this, although even in the last 10 years, this amount of resources, that is an amount of subsidies, has increased quite a lot. The two columns, the one is that the blue one is that the subsidy that has been delivered, and the green one is the subsidy that has been paid. There is a difference there because the subsidy has like a 21 months extension. So if you don't have your house built, or if you have been able to board your house within that time, you lose the subsidy, and then you won't be able to get another one. So there have been a lot of difficulties around that, and that's why there's since many years there is in also supporting the beneficiaries a technical assistance program to help the people in this process. So we can see that it's always been a gap, maybe 10 to 15 percentage of the subsidies that they are given, they don't get to the end. The main characteristic of this program, just to make you an idea, first of all, they have been, because today we have only the second one, this what we call private way. It's very funny, the name, because all the housing in Chile have always been built by the private sector. The difference between the first one, this Servio way, is that it was the regional office of the ministry, the one who hired, or the one who asked the private sector to build the houses and then sell it to the people who has applied for the subsidy. And the second one is the one that the people receive the subsidies and they have to manage the building construction, or they have to look for the houses in the existing market. The application to the housing program could be done individually or in groups. That mainly is from the second part of the 90s, in terms that there was a lot of people who constitutes like a group, and they wanted to live together, and they have been doing some work together, and they don't want it to be treated individually. As I said, the subsidy is valid for 21 months. The beneficiary received a technical assistance to carry out with the housing process, and the process of selection is a very important part of the housing process. All the programs in general have more or less the same requirements. It could vary in one case or another one. They have been one included at a certain point, but in general, they are this one where I'm showing here. Each family can apply only once. The head of the household has to be older than 18 years. It doesn't matter. This is something that it changed according to how the families and the constitution of families have been changing. At the beginning, in the 90s, in order to apply, you have to be like a formal couple. Nowadays, it could be informal. The subsidy is mainly oriented to families. It's not that single people cannot apply, but it's mainly for for elderly people or for the disabled. The government has always not willing really to support the single person. The groups, if there is a group, it has to be at least integrated by 10 families. The project, when you apply with a project, you have to have the approval of the municipality for all the urban and building codes. Each housing scheme, when you have to build one, or the private sector has to build one, they have to provide certain community facilities. For example, if you are 300 houses, will need like a square of certain some average, and some facilities, some sport facilities, some social unit, etc. So that is considered according to the size of to the amount of the houses. And what I was saying, the selection process is very important, and it's always been like a thing that is very transparent, and it's very, everybody trust this and believe that that is not very much space or room for make it in another way. And it has to do with the social vulnerability, with the housing vulnerability, to the level of poverty of the family. not for the middle income class don't need to have this economic survey, to the characteristic of the family, to the if they have saving or they own the land. Since after democracy, it was also implication for some support, specific support for people who have been victims of the political issues, and another if they have another external support. So there's a combination of factors that they apply in order to they being selected. So that's in general how the program have been worked up to date. They continue working at the same time, but as we can see, it's just to the house as the product. The house has not many, just a little consideration where it's located, with where is the relationship with the neighborhood, or with the relationship with the neighborhood, with the municipality where it is located, the level, the socioeconomic level. So all those things are not taken into account in this process. These two new programs that somehow in the future, in this new policy or this new more integrated policy should be placed somehow, is the upgraded housing program that has like three main possibilities: to extend the house if the house was too little and the family has grown and they would like to extend it somehow, they could do it through this program. If the house has not have any possibility of maintenance, because providing the house not necessarily improve the level of poverty, so they could apply to this and do certain reparation, and also to improve the external area of the house. Maybe not in the past 10 or 20 years, but maybe if we're talking about 30 years ago, some development schemes were without green areas or without this kind of amenities or facilities. So the people, the beneficiaries of one existing community, could apply for this in order to do those things that they didn't have on the beginning, or that today they're not working anymore, or they have any problems, or all that. One of the main reasons for the implementation of this program is that it was considered this issue that the people, most of these people hasn't moved really from the level of poverty. So there have been very little possibility of do any maintenance of these houses. And in order to just to recognize that this could in the future increase the deficit of housing because they get too bad, it was better to try to help the people with those reparation. And this renting housing program that I was telling you that is since last year, it's a program that, although we have a leasing program for the middle income class, this has nothing to do with that and is completely different. It's just oriented to, okay, I'm running out of time, so I'm very quickly. It's just oriented to help people with their renting, but it is like for 5 years, but it doesn't imply that people after those time would be able to buy their own houses or to a sort of leasing. So that's something that it will need to be taken into account. Then, just as I was saying, since 2012 and 2013, a group of people, very diverse people, 28% work in this urban development policy that was needed since many, many years. We have had no urban policy since 20 years. And they, in the diagnosis, things that has to do close relation with the housing policy is that one thing is the economic growth. So Chile has increased the GDP very significantly. In terms of location, housing policies developed during decades have not reduced has reduced housing deficit, but hasn't promoted quantity or quality or better location. In terms of social aspect, there are some change in the structure of aging, in the structure of the relation between the people, the people who lives within a home, and the other things that also need to be reviewed. And this policy defines 12 main principles, from whom 3 or 4 of them are directly related with housing, and they are very much the same that they were showing the previous presentation, and also what was Claire mentioning that in her presentation. One is the issue of equity, the social integration, participation, and quality. Those 4 things that should provide the context of this change in the housing policy. So I will final this by saying that this housing policy has, I think, that this not for the first time, but it has to think it more in general and not in just in the object. That's the main thing. Then it has to do a lot of improving in urban and housing legislation. To implement this urban development policy, the government has created an urban development council that has 3 groups. In one of them, we are working around integrated urban planning, and one of the issues is how to deal with the housing, because it's a big issue, still continue a big issue. The terms of integration and equity, the terms of the issue of community participation is no way that all what we have started to do will need to involve community participation in all the process. And that's it. I think I have to finish. Thank you.
We have a couple of minutes for questions. Not knowing how much you know about contemporary housing, what we'll be looking at in Europe, do you see any relationship in terms of the differences or the similarities between what you're doing in Chile and what we're doing in Europe? Can you see any similarities? Can you see any trends in terms of what's happened in the past, let's say 20, 30, 40 years, and what are the trends today between the 2 regions or cultures?
Yes, definitely. I think we have a lot of similarities. The main issue is the issue of this sustainable development or sustainable policy, urban policy, and in this case we'll need the same approach to the housing policy. I think this issue of the community participation, the community involvement, it's something that has been growing. And we have a lot of experience, well, a lot of examples on that, and but it's a lot of things that need to be done. We have some institutionalization of participation since 3 or 4 years ago, but that's not enough to allow people to participate, or to allow the local government to give space people to participate. It was one of the housing programs that has a huge component of participation, but it wasn't very clear the way in which the private sector or the organization who organize the families, how they involve them, or how they take the decision from what they were, the housing scheme. So it is a lot of intention. I think we have a lot of similarities, but they also have to be worked very much. There's one more thing, it's that the issue of the the sustainable, I think it has to be broadened a little bit, because one issue is the energy efficiency, and most of the time when you heard that people is talking about sustainability, it says energy efficiency or recycling, and I think it's a little bit more than that. And that also needs some clarification, needs some research and study, and it's not not everybody's in the same level, so it has something to do there.
You also mentioned aging, which is one of the most important societal challenges.
Yes, and related to that also, and coming back to what Claire was saying about the statistics, I think, for example, in terms of aging, we have a lot of, there is an increasing of the aging population. But for example, you said, well, what does it mean in terms of housing demand? If we ask all some people, do they wanted another home? Do they wanted to change? Do they wanted to go to because they all live somewhere today. So we don't know what's the implication. We have more elderly people, but what's the implication of that on housing? So, and there's a lot of things. They wanted to keep in the places they are. They wanted to move to the city center. They wanted to be, I don't know. So that's some research that is need to be done.
As I have understood it, Latin America is very interesting when it comes to community participation. So my question is, what do you think is most interesting for Europe to learn from Latin America when it comes to participation from citizens in planning?
What do Europe need to learn?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, I think it's we all have to learn one from each other. It's not only one, not Europe from America, from Latin America, because we have different contexts. And of course, there is a lot history in Latin America from community organization, working together, organizing themselves. But there are like I think there's a difference. In the case of Chile, is less informality than most of the other countries. So that's in that case it's a little bit different. Although we have had people that have invade land and squatter and do a lot of things, but now it's a little bit different. But I think what we have not to learn, but just try to exchange the experiences that we have experienced in Latin America and others in another continent, is how to help people to organize themselves, how to help people to believe that they can make an influence, how to help people to build methodologies, how to help everybody to know how to communicate one to another. That's in general.
Viviana, I don't remember if we already discussed that, but I was curious about where do these people come from? Because where were they located before, and what kind of people are supposed to reach these new development areas as a target for the developers? And really, if I may say so, socially speaking, who are they?
They are different. Most of the social housing provided for most of these subsidies, not social housing, these subsidies that the government gives, goes to people who live in the same city. And it's people that, for example, must be sharing with someone or maybe renting a room. But they are in need of a house. So they applied for this subsidy and then they get this subsidy. And beside that, the private sector is building this housing scheme that they after sell them to the people. The people use this subsidy as part of the cost of the house, and they have to have some amount of subsidy, some saving, and in some of the program they don't need a credit, because those two components will be enough. And in other cases they need to go to to a bank or to any of these financial institutions that will give them the credit in order to bring all the amount together. But most of the people lives in the same area, not in the same geographical area. It could be that, for example, if we are talking in the metropolitan area of Santiago, one person living here will find a house in another place sometimes, because there is not the offer of the offer of housing is not that horizontal. It's mainly located in the periphery because of the cost of the land. So it has been some intentional. One of the problems is that the people, it's not only the quality of the material quality of the houses maybe is okay, no problem. The main issue is that the location don't give them access to good or better services, or they have to move. All the mobility is very difficult because the private sector has built this housing scheme in the periphery. I don't know, is that okay?
Okay, thank you very much, Viviana.
Okay.